Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you're getting ready for the UPSC, there's always something new in the headlines. It could be on the exam.
Absolutely.
And today's deep dive is definitely one of those topics.
Sure.
So we're going to be tackling this question that's been going all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Should people convicted of crimes be allowed to run in Indian elections?
It's a big one.
It's a big question, and the Hindu just had an article about this, and let me tell you, some of these statistics are pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Did you know that a huge percentage of our lawmakers have criminal records?
It's pretty wild.
So let's break this whole debate down.
Yeah. Let's see what's really going on.
What's really going on?
You've hit the nail on the head. This is a really important issue, not just for the legal system, but really for Indian democracy as a whole.
Right.
And, as you mentioned, this is definitely prime UPSC territory.
Oh, yeah.
We could easily see questions about this in both prelims and mains. So we'll be looking at the laws and the arguments for and against this, and we'll even touch upon what the Election Commission has to say about all of this.
Okay, so to really understand this, we need to go back to the basics.
Okay.
What are the actual laws that govern all of this?
Well, it all starts with the Representation of the People Act of 1951.
The RPA.
The RPA, exactly. It's essentially the rule book for elections in India.
Okay.
And it lays out who can run, who can't, and why.
Makes sense. So where does the RPA stand on convicted criminals running for office?
Well, there are a few key sections that come into play here.
Okay.
Sections 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3. And they basically describe the specific convictions that can disqualify someone from running and also for how long.
So give us the rundown. What kinds of crimes are we talking about here?
We're talking about some serious offenses.
Okay.
Things like corruption, terrorism, really major offenses.
Got it.
The law is designed to strike a balance. We want to protect that democratic right to participate in elections.
Right.
But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're getting ethical leaders.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what about those convictions that aren't, on that list of really serious crimes?
Right.
Does the RPA address those too?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Section 8.3 covers these situations, and it says anyone who's been sentenced to imprisonment for 2 years or more,
Okay.
they are barred from running for 6 years after their release.
Okay, so it's not just the nature of the crime, but the severity of the punishment.
Exactly.
Got it. So the RPA sets the foundation.
Right.
But I know there have been some pretty big Supreme Court cases
Yes.
that have added another layer to all of this.
Yes, definitely.
We're talking about the Lily Thomas case back in 2013 and the Public Interest Foundation case in 2018.
Right.
These were pretty important, right?
Absolutely. They had a major impact on how we look at this whole issue today.
Okay.
So in the Lily Thomas case, the Supreme Court ruled that if a sitting legislator is convicted of a crime and that crime has a sentence of 2 years or more, then they are immediately disqualified.
Wow. So no waiting around for appeals or anything like that?
Exactly. No more stalling tactics while they are still in office.
Wow. So that's a big change.
It was a major step towards holding these elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, we have the Public Interest Foundation case. And in this case, the court basically said, hey, we need to get serious about decriminalizing politics.
Okay.
But it's up to the parliament to make this happen.
So they call for change, but they leave it up to Parliament to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Parliament hasn't really addressed this?
That's a good question, and it's one that political analysts and legal scholars are still debating.
Right.
It really gets at the heart of the challenges when we try to reform politics in India.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions.
It does.
So we've got the RPA, we've got the Supreme Court weighing in, but what about the Election Commission?
Right.
They're the ones who oversee the whole election process.
Right. That's right. And they've actually taken a strong stance on this issue.
Okay.
The Election Commission has recommended that candidates with serious criminal charges shouldn't even be allowed on the ballot.
Wow.
Yeah, they want to stop them at the nomination stage.
So they're basically saying we don't even want these people to be in the running.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, why are some politicians resisting these reforms?
Yeah.
And what would happen if we implemented a system like that? Would it be good or bad? It's definitely something to think about.
Definitely a lot to consider. And I think this is exactly the kind of analysis that our listeners need to be doing to get ready for those UPSC essays.
Absolutely.
So we've set the stage, but now it's time to really get into the heart of the debate.
Okay.
What are the arguments for and against allowing convicted people to run for office?
It's about to get interesting.
Things are going to get interesting.
And what I think is fascinating is that both sides actually have some really strong arguments.
Okay.
So get ready for a bit of a showdown as we break each argument down.
Let's do it. I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
I'll present the arguments in favor of letting convicted people run for office.
All right.
You ready for a little intellectual sparring?
Bring it on. I'll counter with the arguments against it. This is going to be good.
This is going to be lively.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start off with a big one, the presumption of innocence.
Right.
This is a cornerstone of most legal systems.
Right.
You're innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly.
So shouldn't that extend to running for office as well?
That's a really good point, and it's definitely essential to any fair legal system.
Right.
But, we also have to think about what this means for public trust. When someone who is facing serious criminal charges is in a position of power, even if they haven't actually been convicted yet.
I see what you mean. Okay, so what about this idea of political vendettas?
Okay,
India has a very intense political scene.
it does.
Couldn't people misuse these laws to target their opponents and try to silence them?
Yeah, that's a valid concern for sure. False accusations and using the legal system the wrong way are really serious issues.
Right.
And we have to find a way to deal with them, but we also need to be careful about using this argument to protect people who are actually corrupt or involved in criminal activity. It's a tough balancing act.
It's a tough balance, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, the right to representation.
Okay.
Don't voters have the right to choose whoever they want to represent them, regardless of their past?
Of course, voter choice is super important in any democracy.
Right.
But it brings up an important question.
Okay.
Do voters always have all the information about a candidate's history? And is that information unbiased? And if they don't, can they really make informed decisions?
That's a really good point. Having access to good information is crucial.
It is.
Okay, one final argument for allowing convicted people to run for office.
Right.
Judicial delays.
Yeah.
We know that court cases in India can sometimes take years or even decades.
Fair.
Is it really fair to stop someone from running just because of charges that haven't even been settled in court?
You're bringing up a real issue in the Indian justice system. These slow trials are definitely something we need to work on.
Yeah.
But maybe the solution is finding ways to make the process faster, especially for people in public office.
Okay.
Maybe we could have special fast-track courts specifically for politicians.
Interesting idea.
It might be one way to address the problem.
Okay, so I think I've made the case for letting convicted individuals run.
You have.
Now it's your turn to give us the arguments against it.
All right.
What have you got?
Okay, so let's switch gears and look at why some people think convicted individuals shouldn't be allowed to run for office.
Okay.
First off, we got to think about morals and ethics.
Okay.
Shouldn't our leaders be held to a higher standard?
Right.
Can someone who's been convicted of a crime really represent the people in the best way possible?
That's a good argument. It makes you wonder what it says about us when we let people with criminal convictions hold positions of power.
Yeah, what does it say about our values as a society?
Right.
It can really damage the public's trust and make people cynical about the whole political system.
And this brings us to another argument,
Okay.
the need to clean up politics.
Yes.
India has a lot of politicians facing criminal charges.
It's a disturbing trend.
Letting convicted criminals run just makes the problem worse.
It does, but is simply banning them from running the answer?
Yeah.
I mean, would that really solve anything, or would it just push the problem underground and make it even harder to deal with?
That's a good point. So maybe just focusing on banning people isn't enough.
Exactly. Maybe we need to look at the whole system.
Okay.
We need to tackle the things that cause criminalization in politics in the first place.
Like what?
Things like campaign finance regulations,
Okay.
the influence of money and power, and making the electoral process more transparent.
You mentioned the impact on public trust earlier.
Yes.
What happens when people don't trust their government?
Well, it can create this downward spiral of apathy. People stop caring, they disengage, and in some cases, it can even lead to civil unrest.
Oh, wow.
When people see those in power acting like they're above the law, they lose faith in democracy.
Right.
And that can lead to some serious questions about fairness and justice.
It's a slippery slope for sure. Okay, one last argument against allowing convicted individuals to run.
Right.
Global democratic norms.
Okay.
A lot of other democracies around the world have stricter rules about who can run for office.
Right.
Shouldn't India follow their lead?
That's an interesting point, and we can definitely learn from what other democratic countries have done.
Right.
But we also need to remember that India has its own unique situation,
Okay.
its own history, and its own set of challenges.
Right.
What works in one country might not work in another.
Right. So it's about finding that balance again, right?
Right.
Taking inspiration from others, but also finding our own solutions.
Yeah.
This is complicated stuff.
It is.
And that's what makes this whole debate so important. It makes us think about some really fundamental questions about what it means to have a democracy and what justice and accountability really look like.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've heard both sides of this argument. It's pretty multifaceted.
It is.
What's the bottom line? Can we actually fix this?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's not going to be easy, that's for sure.
Right.
But there are things we can try. It's going to require a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
We need to reform the system itself.
Okay.
We need to make the courts more efficient.
Right.
And we need more transparency in how candidates are chosen.
Okay.
And political parties really need to step up and do their part, too.
It's a big task.
Mm-hmm.
What can regular citizens do? What can our listeners do?
Yeah.
Can they make a difference in a system that seems so set in its ways?
That's where you, the UPSC aspirants, come in. You are the future leaders, the policymakers, the people who are going to make change happen.
Okay.
Understanding these issues, talking about them, and fighting for real reforms, that's how we start to make things better.
That's a powerful message. Our listeners have the ability to shape the future of democracy in India.
They do.
And this isn't just about learning things for an exam.
Yeah.
This is about real-life problems that affect all of us.
Right.
It's about the kind of world we want to live in.
It is.
You're absolutely right. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's recap what we've learned from this article in the Hindu.
Okay, so we started with the laws, the RPA. That's the document that tells us who can and can't run for office based on their convictions.
Right. Then we talked about those really important Supreme Court cases.
Yes.
Lily Thomas and Public Interest Foundation.
Right.
Those cases really brought the issue of decriminalizing politics to the forefront.
They did. And we also discussed what the Election Commission wants to do.
Yeah.
They want to stop people with serious criminal charges from even being on the ballot.
And of course, we had our debate.
We did.
We went back and forth talking about the arguments for and against letting convicted individuals run for office.
We explored both sides.
We saw that both sides have some good points.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's about finding that balance.
Yes.
That sweet spot between protecting individual rights, upholding democratic principles, and making sure we have a government that is clean and ethical.
That's the key.
And even though there are no easy answers, we talked about some possible ways to make things better.
Yeah, like making changes to the system, making the courts more efficient, and being more transparent about how we choose candidates.
And most importantly, we talked about the role that citizens play in all of this.
Yes.
Especially engaged and informed citizens like you, our listeners.
You are the ones who can push for these changes.
You heard it here, folks.
That's right.
So here's a final thought-provoking question for you to consider as we move to the last part of our deep dive. If you were the one writing new laws to fix this problem, what would be your top priority?
Okay.
Would it be making sure things are fair for the candidates?
Okay.
Or would it be about upholding those democratic principles? Or would you focus on keeping that public trust?
Yeah.
And how would you balance all of those?
Right, because sometimes they clash.
Sometimes those goals clash.
That's the really tough part, isn't it? There's no easy answer. There's no quick fix.
No magic wand we can wave.
And that's exactly why this whole discussion is so important.
Yeah.
It forces us to think about these really complicated issues.
Right.
And really consider what kind of democracy we want to build.
It's a lot to think about, but that's what these deep dives are for, right? We don't want to just give you facts and figures.
Right.
We want to get people talking and thinking.
We want to spark a conversation.
Get those wheels turning.
Exactly. So tell us what you think.
Yeah.
Head over to the comments section.
Let us know.
And let us know what solutions you would come up with. We really want to hear your perspectives.
We love getting your insights. And if you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends who are also studying for the UPSC all about it. We're talking about things that aren't just on the exam.
Yeah.
They're important for understanding how Indian democracy works.
Right.
And all the challenges we face.
It's about being an informed citizen.
Absolutely.
We're all in this together, folks.
We are. So until next time, keep those brains buzzing and keep working towards a better future. And of course, a big thank you to The Hindu.
Yes.
For the article that got this conversation started.